NFL Week 11. I'm depressed still over Week 10, so I'm a little less than enthusiastic. So you carry the torch, Ron, here. What's up this week with you?
Well, I did respectfully leave you alone for 24 hours, as you may have noticed, because I knew it wasn't going to be that exciting. But, I thought this morning, well, maybe we could talk about teams that are ready to tank it in. And then you mentioned recently about, well, look at the standings, and almost everybody's still in the race. It's crazy. So I don't think anybody's tanking it right now. We have to save that conversation. So I guess we just bounce around and through. There are some teams I'm more impressed on and some teams I'm not as impressed with. It's interesting navigation around the NFL. Let me start, though, by talking a little bit about yesterday's game. I mentioned this previously, but I don't know why teams do not try to run on Philadelphia. And I think we finally found out that teams that try to do it, like Washington did, they get away with a lot of time of possession edge, and that you can run on Philadelphia. I mentioned that last year, nobody ran against Philadelphia at all, really. And fewest carries from how do I want to phrase this, Chris?
Opponent, fewest carry rushing attempts by an opponent.
Yeah. Nobody, they were 32nd in terms of number of carries that were against the Eagles. And it wasn't because they were blowing out teams. It was because teams wanted to test their pass defense. And I don't think you should test their pass defense right now with Bradbury and Gardner Johnson added to the roster. And I think Ron Rivera discovered that, hey, we can control ball clock and we can get down the field by running the ball. And I think the players like to play for Heineke a little bit more than they do for Carson Wentz. And it showed.
Well, it's I do want to just touch base on last week a little bit, which was a miserable week for me. But I wouldn't change anything that I did because, I had Buffalo and Dallas on money lines, and both teams one up by 14, one up by 17, and somehow they lose. Buffalo, obviously, in horrendous fashion. The miracle Jefferson, the fumble in the end, the stop at the goal line, the fumble in the end zone, the red zone pick. It's important to process weekends like that as quickly as possible. This one's been a really rough one for me. I'm glad I bet it the way I wanted to, but there's nothing you can do about variance, and you have to take it in stride, and you have to evaluate, well, do I regret what I did? And I don't regret any of it, quite frankly. And that's a frustrating situation when you kind of do what you, even looking in hindsight, you don't regret anything off of horrid results. And it's important for people that bet, that realize that short-term variance doesn't mean very much if you're putting yourself in, good positions of value. Great positions of value can lose for a short period of time. And you have to realize that just because the result is a loss doesn't mean you're doing something wrong necessarily. Any thoughts on that, Ron?
Yeah. So I had 8 plays, a lot of plays last week. And I agree with what you said. And, the sample size is small, whether it be 8 plays or 4 plays or so on. And every week is its own adventure. Yeah, I won a small play with Tampa against Seattle, but then I went 1-4 in the morning. And I said, oh, this is going to be a bad result. I'm now, 2-4. Luckily, Pittsburgh was my standalone. I loved Pittsburgh last week. We talked about that a little bit. There were so many reasons to love Pittsburgh. And then came back when Arizona became 3.5. I was going to play them anyway. We talked about that. But when they became 3.5 and it became a battle of the backup quarterbacks, and you and I first met when we talked about Colt McCoy way back when. Yeah. Always liked the guy. He just doesn't have the body to play 2 consecutive games. So you hit that, and I hit the Charger game, and all of a sudden I'm 4-4. One regret, though. You said you wouldn't play anything differently. I would have played differently. I would have possibly not even played the Denver game against Tennessee, knowing that Willis wasn't playing and that Tannehill was playing, because I handicapped that game as Denver being able to handle mobile quarterback Willis, a one-dimensional team that way. And when Tannehill came in, it changed my handicap, and I regret not having that particular play or having it.
Well, Tannehill was pretty useless in that game. Very disappointing performance. See what he brings this week on a short week versus Green Bay. Moving on from that, I noticed I wanted to take a brief look at the divisional matchups. It's funny because I brought it up last week that I don't even know what's going on in these, with team records and stuff. And then I heard it on two different podcasts, better saying the exact same things. It's easy to, forget about looking at the standings. The big switch here that I noticed is the Bills are now in third place. That was awfully quick. We said it before the season started that we anticipated some bumps in the road for the Bills and Tampa Bay, and finally the bump in the road is coming for the Bills. I don't know whether the inside track still isn't with Miami necessarily at this point. What are your thoughts on that division?
Well, it's funny because I thought the Jets would be 2-8 to start, and then strange things happened. They got some breaks, and then they capitalized on playing better defense. Their easiest part of the schedule is later. I thought we could write them off. And Miami, they're just a well-oiled machine right now, especially offensively. They're still vulnerable defensively. New England has some good metrics as far as pass defense, and Buffalo is not winning the close games. Second year in a row that when they either blow people out and I don't know whether it's coincidence or there's something to it, because a lot of things had to go wrong for them not to win by 4 points, like you mentioned on Sunday. But it starts getting in your head a little bit, and that division is the other teams are just playing better. So Buffalo's come really right back to the pack. Their power rating is still number one for me, but it's not with a bullet anymore. It's right there. And they better start winning some of these divisional games. Where are they? They're 0-2 in the division. So that's a problem.
And, let's not forget here that the Bills don't have a divisional win yet. So their climb back is a little bit more difficult than people realize. And the Jets right now carrying they've got a 2-1 divisional record along with Miami. So both of those teams, we're going to be talking about two great games, quite frankly, on Friday, which is involving the Jets and the Patriots. And we've got the Bills in the other one, don't we?
I think you mentioned Cincinnati.
It's Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. But so this AFC East is getting to be an extremely interesting division. Every team over 500 all of a sudden. We mentioned when New England was looking dead that they should rattle off a bunch of wins in a row, and they have. So I'm still not a believer in Miami. I think that a team with that bad of a defense can only go so far, but they're fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you hit it. It's a lot of uncertainty there. No edge for me, but a lot of I think there are four teams. Wouldn't be surprised now the fact that the Jets are still there with some easy opponents coming. Wouldn't be surprised if any of those made the playoffs.
And I'm feeling pretty good about our Baltimore Ravens divisional wager. I think the Bungles have a difficult road ahead of them, and the Ravens basically should be able to coast from here on and just worry about preserving their health. The Cleveland and Pittsburgh can't rally from that far back.
Yeah, Cleveland, wouldn't say it was a mistake, but trusted too much that Cleveland had the roster to play better football before Watson came back. And they're just not playing better football. And they have a quarterback who's better suited to be a backup now, and it's going to be too little too late, just like you said. Disappointed that Cincinnati game is not in prime time. I thought the ebbs and flows of the prime time, moving from 1 to 5 prime time games, it got flexed out. I still think Cincinnati's roster is pretty close to Baltimore's roster right now. But Baltimore has the easy schedule moving forward.
Yeah, and Baltimore could it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could sneak away with that number 1 seed the way things have been mapping out. So
I agree.
That's something to keep them driven. Titans 6-3. I think they've covered 7 weeks in a row quietly, and I still hear people making fun of them and ridiculing them. And all last year I said that they were overrated, but they've and now that I don't have them overrated, everybody's claiming that they are overrated. So it's kind of funny. I do want to, we commented at the end of that Jonathan Taylor interview that his attitude was just amazing. And we felt pretty confident that Colts locker room still had a positive vibe to it. And we looked for some positive stuff from them. And sure enough, that's what we saw.
Yeah, that it just oozed out his passion last week, and I really enjoyed that particular interview. If they would have told me Matt Ryan was starting, like sent me a text beforehand, it would have influenced me, but I didn't see that coming. And they just happened to play a more dysfunctional team than they were heading in with the Raiders. We could still see good things from Indianapolis. Their pass defense is horrid right now, but I kind of think that I know the game plan for Indianapolis moving forward with Jeff Saturday at coach. They're going to play passionate at the line of scrimmage on offense and on defense. They're not going to take that many chances passing the ball, and they're still going to be a little bit soft in their pass defense because I think they're going to sell out a little bit against the run. At least that's the way I'm playing it, and that's the way I'm handicapping it moving forward.
I don't even remember. Did they play this week?
The Colts are playing Philly.
Oh.
They host Philly.
Okay. I think these Raiders are Tostitos. And I don't think Denver can do anything with that offense. The Chargers were lucky to cover. That was two teams that are night and day, quite frankly. The score wasn't indicative of how much better San Francisco is. And Kansas City just keeps grinding along here. I don't think anybody's going to catch Kansas City.
Well, big game this week that got flexed to Sunday night. This will decide it because Kansas City won that very close battle at home against the Chargers, and the Chargers played them 50-50. That game honestly could have gone either way. And this game, not a true home field advantage, even on Sunday night, because it's LA crowd, the Chargers crowd, and so on. But this is the game that they're pointing for. They have to win this game. Otherwise, they're more than 2 games behind in the schedule. They'd be 3 games back, but essentially 4 because it would be 2-0 Kansas City in the lead. So the season is on the line right now. I will slightly disagree with you in the San Francisco game as to night and day better because the Chargers played them really tough for 2.5 quarters. And then they were covering all the way, and only circumstance was why that they had to go for it inside their own 10-yard line, and it got a little tricky in that game. Do I think San Francisco is a better team than the Chargers? Absolutely. But in that particular game, that matchup, especially the first half, I thought the Chargers were going to win all the way till the very end. And
I think you saw the Chargers' best effort, and that's as good as well as they can play. And I don't think you had San Francisco's best effort in the first half.
Well, I think the Chargers can play better once they get their top 2 receivers back, if they ever get their top 2 receivers back. I know the 49ers are just scratching the surface of what they're capable of. So I'm not worried about the 49ers. I'm more worried about the Chargers only because they're one of those 4 or 5 teams that has an incomplete roster right now.
Well, we go to another division where there is not a team under 500. And obviously, that would have been easy to guess at the beginning of the season, the NFC East. We poo-pooed the Washington team, I think, 2 weeks ago, and we were disappointed with I was disappointed that I thought Washington had enough to kind of ruffle some feathers and wouldn't just be an also ran. And 2 weeks ago, it looked like I was wrong, and now they're 5-5, and they just knocked off Philly. They're ruffling some feathers. And do you think they have exposed some sort of a weakness with the Eagles? Is this bye week going to just end up ruining the Eagles? What are you looking for forward with the Eagles here?
Yeah, I think the Eagles, if the Eagles lose 4 or 5 games, please treat it as a success. I mean, 13-4 is an amazing record in the NFL. It just wasn't going to be that they're going to put out their best effort every single week. It's just unreasonable in the NFL. And they couldn't get, what was it, a 30-7 time of possession edge at one point for Washington. I mean, that's the way. I hope teams realize that you should run on Philadelphia to control clock and to expose an area that I think people have just shied away from in the past. But Philly's well built. Their roster's well built. I like Hurts. I think he's a smart quarterback. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but I think he's pretty smart. He has weapons around him. On a lesser team, Hurts would be exposed, much like Mariota would be exposed if he has to pass, because he doesn't have a lot of weapons. But Hurts has a lot of weapons, and he can get away with the fact that he could play less than his best, but has these weapons, even though their tight end is down for about 4 weeks now. I think somebody mentioned on the national broadcast last night that Philly had virtually no injuries the first 8 weeks, much like the Bengals last year, who had no injuries the first 16 or 17 weeks. It helps to stay healthy in the NFL. I think Philly will still win the division as long as Mike McCarthy is the coach of Dallas, because Dallas is probably as good a team. But what he did in overtime, or what he's done in crunch time, he saw Rodgers on the other side. He panicked. He wanted to be up 1-up on them. I don't know how they blew the 14-point lead to begin with. So Philly's probably still going to win the division. I think they're a pretty complete team.
Yeah, kind of amusing to see a 7-2 team at home only laying 3 against the 3-6 Lions.
Well, you know something? I have a question for you, Chris, because this is bugging me. I don't know what to think about the New York Giants other than the fact that their coaching staff has been enormously upgraded. But I don't know what else to think about them. I just don't have them that high ranked, but I can't disregard what they've done. I need your thoughts.
You really have to respect this coaching. Galladay drops a ball and they sit him. He's a nothing burger for that team. They don't even want him in the lineup. I mean, they're paying him $17, $18 million a year. That says something about coaching. Making not feeling obligated to play the guy that's getting paid the most. And I think the Giants have just, kind of like that horse that gets the perfect trip. I mean, they're getting a nice. They've just been fortunate in the situations that they've been in, and the way the scheduling is mapped out, and they're facing the teams that they face when they face them. And I don't think that they're that good. I mean, they're not very high in my rankings. Yeah. Where do I even have them? Yeah, I mean, they're not even in the top half of the league for me. So I don't know where you have them rated.
I have them. I hate to say it. I have them like 23rd.
Yeah, I have them ranked right around there. So not a believer in them, and it's not going to surprise me. I mean, do you know who's got the second most consecutive wins in the NFC behind the Vikings right now?
Maybe I should look it up.
It's the Lions. They've won 2 in a row.
I think they're I don't know what to tell you about the Lions. I think the Bears were the reason the Lions won the game last week. Not just in this extra point, but my goodness, you know exactly what the Lions are going to do, and you can't stop them.
Well, and how do you like this one? The draft pick that they got for Goff, this Goff Stafford trade from the Rams, is actually a higher draft pick than the Lions' own pick at this point.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Give me a percentage from 1 to 100. I don't think you'll need to use 100 as to will Goff be the starting quarterback in opening day 2023?
Is it? Well, I assume he's still under contract for not a whole lot. So
Not guaranteed.
I think it depends. Is this quarterback draft ending up being as strong as we thought going into the NCAA season, or have a handful of quarterbacks played themselves out of the first round?
Couldn't say it any better than what you said. At least 7 quarterbacks have played them completely out of the first round. Disappointed. Wow. I mean, it's ugly. I would say the Heisman favorite, the Tennessee quarterback Hawker, he's played himself into the first round. And then you have the Ohio State quarterback and you have the Alabama quarterback. There are 3 legit quarterbacks that I would draft right now, and the others, please wait. I mean, there's so many negatives. It's hard to play quarterback in the NFL. Those 3 are the only draftable first-round quarterbacks for me right now.
Is a quarterback a guaranteed number 1 pick?
Let's see, who would have the number 1 pick right now? Houston. Yeah, I would say yes. Although if Lovie Smith has any say in the matter, I may retract that statement.
Well, no use discussing. I'm not a believer in this Green Bay comeback. Show me another game, and I'll bring you out of the bottom 10. You were all jumping up and down. You bet Tampa to win the division last week, and they did in fact get their win, and an Atlanta loss to help you out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Found even better odds for them to make the playoffs rather than win the division. Now, I think they're one and the same in a sense, because I don't think 2 teams go in that division anyway, but you just take the best odds you can take. I'm more of a believer in Tampa than Green Bay if you want to compare the 2 teams.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that is because Minnesota is going to win that division, and Tampa should win the division by default.
Yeah, it's not over yet. I'll tell you one of the biggest disappointments that bothered me was, and you haven't seen this in a while, it seemed like Seattle's visit to Germany was too big of a moment for them, and it took them the whole first half to come down to earth and catch their bearings. And boy, you just did not get a good first half effort from Seattle, and it just seemed so unprofessional. The moment was just too big for them. Did you watch any of that? Did you get any of the same feeling?
I got the feeling before the game that would happen. And I think you said it just right. Tampa Bay went there on a professional trip with a 20-year quarterback, obviously Hall of Famer and so on, with coaching staff and so on. Seattle wanted to take in the whole atmosphere with Pete Carroll. He had a bunch of young players, 5 rookies starting. Some of them admittingly said it was their first trip out of the United States.
Yeah.
And all that added up to a play for me on Tampa in the game. Not a big one, I should say. But the moment was too big for them. I agree. And it may take them out of their rhythm. It's good that they have a bye right now. It's not that Seattle was supposed to take everybody by storm, even though I loved them at the beginning of the year. But I loved them to go 7-10. I didn't love them to win the division. Make no mistake, I thought 7 was the right number for them, not 8 or 9 or 10. So they're going to have to come down from this. I think they'll be fine, primarily because Arizona and the Rams are, probably not complete teams, let's say. And hopefully San Francisco has a path, an easier path if Seattle stumbles a couple more times to win the division. But that moment, that trip was a little too big for them.
It'll be interesting to see where the Rams go from here. We talked about it before the season started, that they were the most fortunate team with injury luck, and they've been brought back down to earth this season and facing some obstacles. Kupp's going to be out for an extended period of time. And Stafford with these concussion protocol, it seems to be lasting way too long, and an already diagnosed shoulder injury. At some point, they may pack him in. I mean, what's the point of playing, a 30-something guy that you're paying a fortune for if you've got no chance and you don't have the tools?
Yeah, they need him healthy for next year. We've said this so many times. We'll just repeat it one more time. The Rams were never going to be more than 9-8 with the current roster that they had. They bought their way into the Super Bowl last year with Von Miller, with Beckham, and a couple of other players, Sony Michel, and who's the other guy? The guy, Eric Weddle, that they took out of retirement, I think, and they put him in the secondary. They were never going to be more than a 9-8 team. They have a flawed roster. They lost their left tackle to retirement. Stafford had an undisclosed injury. None of the guys played in the preseason. All that's water under the bridge now. And they're really looking like a 5-win team.
Just off the top of your head, over the last 2 weeks, what teams have shifted dramatically in your power ratings?
I probably shifted Cleveland down because I was probably too much based on what the expectation should be rather than what they were on the field. So I think that one deserved a little bump down from me. You're asking out the top of my head. It's funny because a team like the Giants didn't change much, even though, I mean, they didn't go up. Minnesota, I would say, changed with their wins over Buffalo and so on. I'd have to say Minnesota changed. It's not that I had them in the top half, but that they've earned the right to be more than just in the top half. They've earned the right to be in the top 7-8.
Well, you'll see. I already had a banner prepared for that team because,
okay.
I put that comment on Twitter 2 weeks ago on what I viewed a Minnesota Green Bay line to be, and I got blasted that Minnesota isn't that good. And now 2 weeks later, everybody is on this Vikings bandwagon, and they've actually gone down in my rankings, winning these last 2 games. So the comedy of this is just ironic in my eyes. People are raising them while I'm lowering them based on what they're doing on both sides of the ball the last couple of weeks.
I don't usually make drastic changes at this time of the year. I circle power ratings when there's cluster injuries or key injuries to a quarterback or the face of your franchise, like a Cooper Kupp or somebody like that. So nobody's going to go drastically up or down. My power ratings change a little bit more based on road wins, home wins, and college football and stuff like that. But in the NFL, I'm not going to have a lot of changes at this time of the year.
Just touching base on San Francisco, you're not do you think they're the quiet monster that's just going to, is the force to be reckoned with? Or I think we saw a little chink in the armor with Philadelphia. Do you think Minnesota has what it takes to take San Francisco?
I don't think it's quiet anymore that they're a monster. I think at full strength, San Francisco is the best team in the NFC. You thought that a couple weeks before I did, but of course they weren't anywhere close to full strength about 3 weeks ago. They got Jeff Mitchell back. Now it's pick your poison. Jeff Mitchell, McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel on some sort of run or end around and stuff like that. You got 3 guys who could break the game open at your disposal, and that makes Jimmy G look a whole lot better. He's got his left tackle back, Trent Williams, who just powers over people. They're not completely healthy in the secondary for sure, so it's still a little bit of an Achilles heel for them. But I expect them to make a big run in the division because of where the other teams are situated right now, and that's going to help them. If let's say Philadelphia goes 13-4. It's not out of the realm of possibility that San Francisco could challenge that record as well if they get red hot.
Well, San Francisco has 3 fewer wins than Minnesota and Philadelphia. That's why I kind of used it as, are they the quiet monster that's way behind that people don't realize how good they are? But I kind of agree with you. I think they don't. Nobody's looking at the record. They don't care. They know how good they are.
Yeah. What team do you think that's in the playoffs right now, either AFC or NFC, based on their record, that's going to fall out of the playoffs? Maybe one of the division leaders. What division leader is the most fake? I mean, you can't use Tampa really because they're going to win even if they're 9-8 or something. But what current division leader is it? Miami?
Well, yeah, I would actually go with Seattle as guaranteed to not win the division at this point. But Miami would be the second team there, just purely on the dynamics of where teams are sitting at this point. The Bills will make a run. We're going to talk. We're going to have a good conversation on the Bills Friday. I don't want to get into it today, but I've got a lot to say about that team, and I think you do too. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to see if Miami can stay healthy, though. I don't think they will.
Yeah, and they got that 1-2 punch at wide receiver, and so far so good. If they keep them healthy all year, you're going to have to play a good offensive game because you're going to get in shootouts against Miami.
You had some comments on the coaches.
Okay, so every year, we're not covering college, but we know that 24 to 27 coaches get fired or move on or accept higher level jobs in college. But the same is true in the NFL. On the surface, you don't know who's going to get fired. But when it all shakes out, what did we have, 9 or 10 new coaches this year? Mm-hmm. It's what have you done for me lately? So if we think that they're going to be 5 or 6 or 7 coaches, 5 at the minimum, we already have 2, right? We have Carolina's coaches out and Indy's coaches out. I'm pretty sure Denver's coach is not going to be there next year. At least if I were coaching, he wouldn't be there next year. And Arizona's coach is probably not going to be there unless they make a run at the playoffs. So let's say Kingsbury goes 8-9. Do you think he keeps his job? I think 20%.
It's probably higher than that, unless they completely embarrass themselves going forward. I think Cleveland's coach, they could use somebody else there, obviously, at this point. That's a big disappointment, but maybe they'll give him another year.
Yeah, it's really tough because people are calling for New Orleans coach. He's clearly been overmatched right now. What a difference not having Sean Payton in the room. There's a chance Dennis Allen gets demoted again. It's a tough call when you give somebody just 1 year. Josh McDaniels is facing that in Vegas, but his roster, it's just awful with all the draft choices. I would give Josh McDaniels another year, but I would be careful about giving Dennis Allen another year because I think you're heading into mediocrity, especially offensively, if you let Dennis Allen coach the offense. Yeah,
I agree. I don't think we're going to see as large of a coaching turnover as we saw last year by any means, because just, looking at the realistic expectations, you really have a possible in the NFC West, one, which would be Arizona. Mm-hmm. You've got the Saints as a possible. Atlanta's not going to change. Tampa's not going to change. Carolina already changed. So you've got one additional team. I don't think you're going to lose a coach at all in the NFC North. I don't think you're going to lose a coach in the NFC East either. If Washington keeps up and they play around 500, Rivera's not going to be gone. I agree with you. I think they keep things the same for the Raiders. I think they've had a lot of misfortune, but the Denver guys got to go. So there's only one coach that's leaving that division. The Chargers could make a move if they flame out. Mm-hmm. They're going to keep Lovie Smith at Houston. They're not going to get rid of him.
I know, and we're going to love it too.
So there's not going to be any new coaching vacancies in that division. Cleveland maybe, and no possibility of a coaching change in the AFC East. So very few. I think we're only looking at a couple of 3 or 4 more coaches to go. I put the over under at 6.5.
Okay, yeah, 6.5. Yeah, I think there'll be at least 5, and I think generally it'll be 5 to 7. It won't be like last year, which was crazy. But I mean, how many can you have? I mean, you of course you had the Houston job turnover twice because there was one and done last year with David Culley, but you had 16 or 17 coaching changes in the last 2 years alone. There's only 32 jobs. So that's why I like Mike Tomlin, because you know what you get from him year after year after year. And it's nice to have a coach that actually coaches more than 5 years in the league.
Are there any underachieving teams that you still think could come out of nowhere and actually do some damage?
Well, I think Cleveland's completely underachieved. I don't care that Brissett's the quarterback and he was a caretaker or whatever. I expected more out of the rest of the team. And we didn't get it. We didn't get it last week. They lost by 22 off their bye week to Miami. That's just a bad sign. And I don't know what's going on there. I know quarterback drives the league in a lot of different ways. So maybe next year they'll be better, but I don't understand why their defense got so bad so quickly. And I do think New Orleans completely underachieved as well.
Yeah, but they keep, these same teams keep getting these injury bugs. It's easy to say after last night's game, but that Washington, I'm telling you, they're not that bad, and they really like Heineke.
Yeah.
I think Washington ends up ahead of the Giants somehow. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I mean, they got 5 wins. They're 5-5, and a lot of that division saves their head-to-head divisional games for December and January.
Yeah.
Some of these teams play 4 of their last 5 games against the division. So they're jockeying for position, and then they're going to start playing each other like crazy. So we haven't seen the last of the shakeup in that division.
No. Anything really exciting for you this week in the upcoming games?
Exciting. Well, we're not going to talk about the 2 games that we have on Friday, which are interesting games. I do have a lot to say about Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and maybe a lot to say about the dynamics of line movement in the New England and Jet game, but we'll save those 2. I have a comment on the Washington-Houston game. I mean, it's not a good situation for Washington. So I have to look at that particularly closely. I think the Thursday game is a compelling game. Obviously, that'll pass before we talk on Friday. You got some thoughts on the Thursday game?
I think it's awfully injury dependent. Tennessee was already shorthanded last week, and from what I understand, their injury situation got even worse. Do you have an update on that?
No, I haven't checked NFL injuries today at all.
Just it's a shame that that's a Thursday night game, frankly. Injury metrics on this one site say they're dead even. The health on both of those teams are dead even.
Well, the only other compelling game for Sunday that's worth talking about in advance is Dallas and Minnesota, because they look on paper to be pretty even teams.
I think that's going to be that's an afternoon game. I know the Lions have the A team for whatever reason for Fox. I laughed at that the Lions Giants game gets the A team at the early games, but
New York market.
I'm going to be there's a bunch of different ways you can spin this game. I mean, a lot of people find it incredulous that Dallas is favored. Somebody compared it to the same thing that Seattle and Tampa Bay went through last week, where you've got 2 sides of people, 2 sides of bettors that just cannot believe where this line is. So it just seems like the Vikings could be in for such a flat spot. Dallas could come in there with all the motivation in the world after that horrible loss in Green Bay. I mean, that's what kind of sticks out to me more than the line. What about you?
Well, I laughed at myself at the beginning of the year when we talked about these teams. And I talked about Minnie, and I said I was high on them. At one point, I was low on them at one point with Zimmer gone, with the changes to the defensive line, with the lack of the secondary. And I said laughingly in the reports I did, I just gave up. I don't know what to think about Minnie. And it looked to me that they would have 10 toss-up games at the start of the year. I said, no team had me in thinking more tight games than Minnesota was the team that I thought would play just flip a coin games. And they've won all the flip a coin games, but everything has come down to 3 points. Minnie has been in more one-score games, just as I thought at the beginning of the season, than any other team. Now, did I think they were going to win them all? Of course not. I thought, okay, they're 9-8, whatever they are. I don't know. I just didn't know, but they're winning these close games. And I think we're just in for what could be another shootout. What's the over under on the game? 47.5 or so.
Yep. 47.5.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if we looked at a 24-23, 27-26 final. Either quarterback.
Dallas can't get in shootouts. I don't think it's not good for them.
Well, they could if they test Minnesota's secondary, if their offensive line holds up, because Minnesota doesn't have a great secondary. Patrick Peterson delivered, though, 2 interceptions in that game with his savvy. He cemented, in my opinion, his Hall of Fame candidacy with those 2 interceptions. Just reminded people how good he was all those years in Arizona. So they have some talent back there, but it's aged talent.
I think, Cooper Kupp has more wins this season, or Cooper, what's his last name?
Cooper Rush.
Cooper Rush has more wins than Prescott, if I'm not mistaken, this season for Dallas.
It's possible. Well, we just don't know what trouble Mike McCarthy will cause in this game.
Yeah, he punts when he's supposed to go for it. He goes for it when he's supposed to kick, and it's frustrating. I don't know what else to say about this week. I got the Week 10 blues still, and they're going to dissipate by the end of today. Haven't dove into next week yet. Just a couple of things. Looking at the Thursday game is interesting. I might get involved in that depending on which way the line goes, and what the health situation is with Tennessee.
Yeah, I have to look at that one a little closer. I think line of scrimmage edge might favor Tennessee, but I haven't done a deep dive in that game by any means yet. So the line is sitting at 3, I believe.
It's there's a couple of very weak 3.5s, or it's 3 minus 120s everywhere.
Yeah, so if I end up on the Tennessee side, I'm going to be satisfied with 3 or more points, so I can really take a look at doing a deeper dive rather than rush into that.
It's going to be pretty hard not to play the Titans when the 3.5 does inevitably pop up.
Yeah, they just tend to play those kind of games too, where they lull you to sweep a little.
Yeah, and that's what it takes. I mean, that's what Washington did to Philadelphia last night. So sometimes boring is good. I got nothing else. You got anything else?
Let's just touch real quickly on Kansas City. The line has touched 7, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's 6.5, 7.
Yeah. So like we saw late action against the Chargers last week, is it just that Kansas City's too much better for an injury-ridden Charger game? Is the public pushing this up a little too much? Is Mahomes just too good for the Charger defense? It's just such an it may decide the Chargers' playoff hopes even. It's that important.
Yeah, it's. I can't see this line staying where it is. Actually, all the 7s have basically disappeared. There's only a couple of 7s left, and it's not going to surprise me to see this get below. It could get down to the 5.5 range.
I originally priced it at 5.5. Without expecting at least one Charger receiver to be back. if not both, Allen or Mike Williams. I think if you don't have either of those weapons, it really plays into Kansas City's hands. So you have to have at least one so they can, otherwise people will key on Austin Eckler. And we saw what happened when San Francisco keyed on them in the second half. It shut the Chargers down.
I mean, I think Chiefs backers are going to be not going to be looking forward to needing a touchdown to win. The Chargers always get extra play that they don't necessarily deserve in the betting market for some reason, just because of expectations. Don't you feel that way sometimes?
I wish they had more of a home field advantage to really exercise that, but because they don't really have that, when you see a Pittsburgh come in with all their terrible towels, or you're going to see a sea of red with Kansas City because they have a nice following.
Sure.
It kind of dilutes that. And I really think that the Chargers are a playoff type team this year, especially since their special team play is markedly better than it's ever been in the last 7, 8, 10, 12 years. I mean, they're actually playing decently on special teams. They blocked a punt, I think, last week as well.
Well, maybe they'll do an onside kick on the opening kickoff like Jacksonville did.
That just wakes up the team. I hate that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When I see it, especially in the college ranks, what's the saying? Let sleeping dogs lie. Just go about your game. If you want to do that in the third quarter or something like that. Don't wake them up in the first quarter.
Yeah, and we saw something similar with Jim Campbell or Dan Campbell and the Lions last year against the Rams. It doesn't work well. All you do is piss off the other team.
Yeah. You're telling your team that you're not as good and you need tricks to get over the hump. And I think in that game or one of the games, wasn't there like 7 or 8 trick plays that they did in that game? There was one game where Detroit just went wild out of the box and stuff like that. And, short term works, long term, it's not the answer. That's all I have. But I think we're going to have a fascinating discussion on Friday, and I will clue people in advance as to who the guests are, because if we have anything like the 3 we had last week, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to send over a few questions that we want to hear answered so we can talk about. So hopefully that'll happen again this week. Appreciate everybody joining, and we will be back on Friday to talk Jets, Patriots, Bungles, and Steelers, and whatever else has come to mind after I've worked my way through week 10-itis, and I'm cured of that. So, good luck, everybody. We'll see you. Go Titans probably on Thursday. See you later.